Outer Orange.
A lot of people have been asking me about this deck, so I figured, sure, let's talk about it. Привет, yeah. So I actually originally made this deck on stream, and I actually did go over it on stream, but I didn't really like I didn't talk about it enough and kind of sort of what it is. But this is the Fenelle deck. A lot of people have been kind of like keeping this on a low radar, I feel like, but it's actually a pretty good deck. I built it, and then I was like, I don't know if I want to drop like another 100, because basically this deck's around 100. If you take out the stagger, it's actually relatively cheap, but with the stagger in mind, it is kind of expensive. And then also, like, if you don't have the triggers, it's expensive. However, if you already have all the triggers and the PGs and everything, this deck's actually relatively cheap. Kind of plays like Gravidia, but your starter can be kind of whatever you want it to be. And then when you actually, no, it does not. Oh, actually, it can be whatever you want it to be. And then when you ride up, you get to choose, you get to look at top 7, add 2 trick or treat cards, and add them to your hand, which are these cards. You can have 16 of these, and basically you kind of want to maximize on these as much as possible. Some decks run like a lesser count and kind of more units. I personally think that this is like the better route. I think it should be running 16 of these, but maybe it's just my play style. I just like hitting, I like deck thinning, I just like that concept, so I want to see these as much as possible. Also, it ramps up the numbers a lot more, and you have like revival cards in this deck, so you don't really need to worry about losing your units as much, but it does kind of suck in terms of units. Sometimes you have to use your triggers as units because that's just how the deck is. But it's very, if you've played Gravidia, you're kind of familiar with this play style, right? So it's not that big of a deal. But anyway, after the ride line, you go from the 1 to the 2. You do basically the same thing. You search for 2 more, and again, there's all top 7, so you have to hope you hit, which is again one of the reasons why I really value these cards, because it kind of just makes it easier to hit. And also, since the grade 3 like procs multiple copies of the order, you want to have as many copies as possible in your hand to kind of get that going. Going into Fenelle herself, basically during your turn you can play 3 orders, but you cannot play orders other than trick or treat or regalia's pieces. So keep in mind, you can only play those orders. So like, I mean, you just keep something kind of keep in mind. This deck's pretty like very strict to that. But her second effect says, which is kind of where this deck kind of gets nutty. When this unit attacks, if you play 3 or more orders this turn, you can carry +1, choose one of your guns until end of turn. That unit and this unit gets a crit, and all your front row units get +2k power for each trick or treat in your drop. So basically, if you just have like a bunch of trick or treats in your drop, the numbers get insane. Also, the Vanguard gets a crit and the rear guard gets a crit, which is pretty nuts. Also, considering your front row also gets the power on top of that, so you basically have a mini persona turn on top of crit pressure, on top of numbers. So this deck just basically says, hey, eat all this damage or guard it if you can. It is a 3 attack deck currently, but it can become more. I think that's kind of the big thing to kind of keep in mind as you're building or trying to test into this. Let's talk about the trick or treat cards, because they're actually really good. I actually really like the trick or treat cards. It says you can play up to 16 of these. You can play this card if you have Vanguard Fennel's card name. So keep in mind, you do want the ride line to be Fennel as much as possible. And then you can also just play these cards early on, just have them drop, and then you can set up for more depending on how many on your hand. But if you play one time, you can choose one of your opponent's rear guards and bottom deck it, and this is pretty cool. If they didn't put a rear guard, you draw a card, which is also really nice. So if they have nothing to choose, you just straight up draw, which is also good because you can just draw more of your deck, see more orders, do whatever, just play orders to play orders type of thing. Basically, there's no downside in playing the orders, you just play them. If you don't bottom deck something, you draw. If you do bottom deck something, cool, your opponent just lost the unit. It means that they committed. If they choose to commit, they kind of screwed themselves. If you play it in order 2 times in one turn, you can draw a card and also countercharge. So now you can draw 2, basically, and countercharge 1, if in case you do the bottom deck doesn't work. And then if you play it in order 3 times, you can choose a grade 3 less from your drop it called to rear guard circle, which is also very useful, as that lets you get back units that you may have been discarding early on. So if you're like pitching early on, if you don't have orders but you're pitching units, you can get them back, which is also really nice. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. I do like the fact that you can set up your board all the time as very useful. So if you play in order 3 times, you get all the effects, which is just really cool. And yeah, basically, for those that are wondering, because I kind of had this curiosity too, if you play in order once, you get the first effect. If you play in order twice, you get the second effect. If you play in order 3 times, you get the third effect. So something to keep in mind. Another thing, I think this deck's actually really easy to play. I know that sounds weird. It looks hard when you look at it, but it's actually a very simple deck. You basically keep playing orders, and you keep using the effects off the orders, and you just set up columns. I think the only thing you have to be wary of is your shield. Just something to kind of know. I actually think this deck's really easy. I'll kind of show you guys like a quick video of someone playing it, just to give you guys a quick rundown. But it's not a very difficult deck. But anyway, going on in, we kind of talked about the ride line, talked about the main Vanguard. We have Stegra, pretty important card. She just has been placed on rear guard circle other than by card's ability. So basically, if you revive her, this ability doesn't go off. You can still pass like a top 5 of cards of your deck and choose a card greater than or equal to your Vanguard. Less than or equal to your Vanguard, a call to rear guard circle, if it's a unit card, and then put it to your hand if it's a normal order. So basically, if you get an order, you can put it to hand. If you get a unit, you get to call it to the board. And it says when she attacks, you can card draw a card. She gets +10k power. Overall, really good card. Honestly, she's pretty pricey right now, so she's a pretty sought out card. She is good. I would say her second ability is pretty good. Her first ability is definitely hit or miss depending on the kind of deck you're building. But overall, just a very interesting kind of quote unquote kind of sort of generic card that Lyrical got. Next, we have this card, Aristana. I love this card. I don't know why. I think it's because of how we look on it. It just looks so cool. It says when she's placed on rearguard circle during your main phase, if you play 3 or more orders this turn, you can solo choose a normal unit with a different card name from this unit, and you from dropping call to rearguard circle. So basically, she lets you call a card. Also really nice. And then she says when she hits, you can choose a trick or treat from your deck and put to your hand. They can basically just deck out cards, so she's an on-hit girl too, so also pretty nice. And then last but not least, we have this card as well. This is basically your unbricker. Everybody says when placed on rearguard circle, you can cast one, search your deck for up to 1 trick or treat, reveal it, and put it to your hand. And if you search your deck, you shuffle. And it's a deck or drop, sorry, just to be clear. And then during your turn, if you have 3 or more trick or treat cards in your drop, she gets 5k power, so she's a 13k beater. So basically, ideally, you want to use her to call out her, or you want to use her to call out not much else. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, your options are very limited. So if you ever have her in the deck, you basically just want to call out this card, because there really isn't much else to call unless it's like a persona ride or your ride line, to be honest. This one doesn't activate off of her abilities. It's something to keep in mind, so you can't just revive and go like crazy with this. But another thing to keep in mind, this card also revives you cards, so you should be able to maintain a board state. It's gonna be tough, I'm not gonna lie. Every unit kind of matters. You do have the revival that Gravidia actually doesn't have access to as easily, so I will say that this helps. Gravidia has Combine Rusher, obviously, so that's basically the deck. I am running the blue over trigger in this deck. You can choose to run the red one. The reason I think the blue one's actually good, I'm a big sucker for not blue over trigger. I don't know, I'm weird. I know the crit's nice, but I'm kind of weird about the blue over trigger. But the reason I like it in this deck is because it is a 9th crit, and this deck really likes critical triggers, because the reason being is if this unit gets a crit and your rearguard gets a crit, and if you have another rearguard that doesn't have a critical trigger, then you check the OT or you check a critical, basically every column becomes lethal. And I think that's important because that's sort of what the deck wants. And because of that, I actually think the blue OT makes more sense in this deck. Also, this deck works with drop zone a lot. However, counter argument is the red OT is also a 4th attack, and the red OT is just insane. It also draws you cards. It lets you basically have a really big column swinging twice, which can also be very different. So you lose the crit, but then you have the column that has the crit, and the power on it is going to be kind of insane as well. So it's kind of up to you which route you want to go. I think both over triggers are actually really, really good in this deck. I don't say that very often. If you guys have been hearing me or listening to me, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of the blue OT. It's been like definitely an over trigger that every single time I test it, I'm like, there's just something that doesn't hit as strong as red OT. Literally just yesterday I was playing Prism, and I had the red OT in for the first time, and I was feeling the power of the red over trigger. It definitely made the difference versus having the blue one, at least in my eyes. That's how maybe it's just my play style. I don't know. I don't understand the blue over trigger argument versus the red over trigger. In most decks, I will say in some situations like this one, there is hope for it, but there is hope for the blue over the red. But anyway, I guess it's defensive offensive play style, and I'm definitely more of an aggro player. I like closing out games quicker than most people would, but that's just how I play. Anyway, outside from that, we have the Sanctitude here, so there's that. You don't have to run this, but you can. You can also run Ura in this deck if you want to kind of lower on the orders just a little bit, just to throw Ura in just to hit the Regalius pieces, because we're out getting the Regalius piece soon, the one that gives the resist. That card is very important. I've been talking about it a lot. Off screen, on screen, anywhere you see me, I've mentioned how important and impactful that order is. I'm sure people are aware of this, but some people may not know that it's dropping or they've been out of the game for a little bit, so I bring it up a lot. That piece is very strong, and any deck and most decks are going to want it, so you may want to bump down some cards and maybe put the Ura in. Ura can be brought back with revival, so you can actually spam Ura more. Or something I want to bring up, actually, this deck particular is one of the few decks that revives very frequently, or enough to where other lyrical decks don't. Usually lyrical decks, once they lose that card, they gotta lose it permanently. This deck doesn't work like that. It actually can bring back cards, and Ura self-retires herself, so you can actually keep recalling Ura back out and kind of spamming that way. And I would even suggest you can even try a build where you're running 4 Uras and kind of going wild with the on-hits, and even prioritize like that on-hit over this on-hit, but that's just something you can think about. Again, this is a crit deck, so most of the time people will be guarding the crits, obviously, but they can only guard so many crits. Something's gonna slide, right? But overall, really cool deck. I really like it. I got a lot of requests for this one, so I decided to make a video on it. I don't really have any games or anything like that. However, I do have a channel that I can shout out because they have games. And I'm going to show you guys that channel. I talked about this channel on stream. So this is the channel that I was watching on stream, and also the reason why I saw it was because they had 2 Fenelle tops in their like locals things, so I thought I'd, like showcase it on my stream. But basically this is H06 or Heal on 6, and they posted the video pretty recently, so you guys can check it out as well. I would recommend watching it if you want some Fenelle knowledge. There's quite a bit of videos here, and it's against Drajuled, and Drajuled is actually, in my opinion, one of the hardest decks to fight. I think that deck's obnoxious in like every way possible. But anyway, as I'm talking about this, you guys can kind of just look, but I recommend check out this video and kind of getting an understanding. It's very, like I said, this deck isn't very hard to play. I think once you get the idea down, it's relatively easy. I think the biggest thing is just constantly worrying about setup. Yeah, I think it's cool. I am after watching these videos and watching some other stuff, I've been kind of more into the idea of like building it. But I really don't know if I should be investing into it, because like I don't know if it's gonna get better, or you know, if it's gonna get power crept out or whatever. I do think it's really strong. This is definitely like an A tier deck to me right now, mainly because I can just close out games really quickly, and I think that's important, especially going to Stride. The Stride deck meta and just shredding people's hands, I think is very, very optimal. And also this deck does hit over certain number intervals. The biggest intervals right now is definitely the mouse interval. So basically the mouse that people used to guard with, you definitely want to hit over that number, which is usually 33, and then you also want to hit over with magic numbers like 28, 38, 48. Those are just really good numbers. It makes it super awkward for your opponent to guard. Those are very important things to keep up with, and I would highly recommend thinking about that when you're deck building now more than ever. In the past, like the magic numbers mattered, but I think now because there's more defensive options, they matter even more, because you want to make it as impossible for your opponent to guard as ever, and you need to do that in very specific intervals. Hey, look at over trigger I checked. That's the blue one, my favorite one. You'll notice that I talk about this a lot, but a lot of decks, the reason why they're weaker is because they can't hit those kind of numbers. Oh man, that homie just went to 6, just like, is that 6? Yeah, he just went to 6. So yeah, so just something kind of keep in mind as you're deck building. Please try to build around the knowledge of the mouse, which is the 20k shield, or just any 20k shield in general that exists in the game, which is 33, and then the magical intervals of like 5ks, like 18k intervals, 20k intervals. You know, like it always makes it awkward for everyone to guard if they don't have 10ks in their deck and stuff like that. Before I let you go, the code for this is 44YF, so if you want to check this out for yourself while you're watching, or you've been watching me or whatever, there you go. This is a very standard build. There's nothing out of the ordinary here. I think this is a very standard 16 order build. I don't really know what a 10 order build really looks like, to be honest with you. Definitely a good thing to try out. So yeah, that's all I have for this video. I don't own the deck, so I haven't like physically been playing it. However, my friends have been playing it, and I've been seeing other people play. I've been watching videos on it and all that stuff, so I thought I'd give you guys the knowledge that I know. If I were to build a deck, I'd probably start with the list that I just provided y'all and kind of go from there and just see what in the world I could do with this deck, because I actually kind of really like it. It's kind of starting to interest me, and that's probably why people are asking me about it. So I hope this helps you in your journeys and your Fenelle building. VANGUARD.shop, code orange for all your goodies. You do not forget, we have a lot of new stuff coming out. We have the triple set coming out, and we have the trial decks coming, and we have Divine Z coming, so you may want to pre-order any of that stuff to get ready for Divine Z and Energy and all that fun stuff. We also have Springfest coming around the corner. I think officially in like a week or two. We have the first one starting, so it's just something to keep in mind. If you need your cards, VANGUARD.shop, code orange for all your goodies. On that, guys, peace out. Das Vidania. We'll see you guys in a future video. Bye!